Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Game Over Winnipeg. My name, of course, is Brady. I am joining you here on a night where, or I guess an afternoon, where the Winnipeg Jets get a big win over the Paul Maurice Florida Panthers, 6-4. And I'm joined here tonight with my good buddy Jacob Stoller. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. How are you, Matt? Thanks for having me.
I'm, I honestly cannot complain on it. When the Winnipeg Jets win, I'm feeling happy. When the game goes like it is, it's a very exciting one. I'm just
Hmm.
sitting here waiting to do a show after and knowing there's lots to talk about. Before we do get into it, though, Jacob, why don't you give everyone a little bit of insight into yourself? Let them know who you are, what you're doing for work. Obviously, over at the Hockey News and Yahoo, and if I missed anything else, let them know.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Brady. Yeah, so as you said, I work for the Hockey News, and I'm a multimedia journalist. I do stuff for our magazine, our website, like thehockeynews.com. I host a couple podcasts for them as well. And then for Yahoo, I'm a freelance writer, so anything from news hits to features and whatnot. Born and raised in Winnipeg. I lived in Toronto the last couple of years, but back here, back here out of the center of the universe. And I don't maybe, obviously I pay quite close attention to the Jets. I'm maybe not necessarily as much as some of the beat reporters. I'll usually do stuff on the visiting team sometimes or bigger features, but it's hard not to be dialed in when you're living in the city.
Exactly. Yeah, the buzz around the city's been high. It's been a crazy off season. I'm sure we will chat about all the changes and the outlook on the team this year. Before we get into it, though, gonna have to do a little bit of housekeeping for the stream here. Obviously, this is the first solo Jets show this year. If you guys missed it last week, not what last week, geez, on Tuesday, the first game was against the Flames, and if you didn't see any Game Over Winnipeg specific streams, that's because for SDPN for Game Over, we're doing these head-to-head streams now, rather than having the Flames do their own show and myself, and Liz do a Winnipeg show. We're combining them together, having a fun, lots of chirps, lots of bets, lots of giving each other shit over our teams, and hopefully, I hope you guys missed it because I had to wear a Calgary Flames jersey after losing to them in the season opener. But today's a new day. The Winnipeg Jets win today, so that's one thing off the housekeeping board. Second, now we're going to be taking questions at the end of the show rather than having them kind of coming in interspersed throughout the show. So if you have any questions, please save them for later on. I will put a call out there for them if you have any questions for myself or Jacob, of course. And last but not least, certainly not least, just a little initiative. If you've been following me on Twitter, you'll see that I've been retweeting Jets Money on the Board. It's a little little initiative that was put together by Cody Magnuson, kind of in hopes to kind of replicate what the Senators and the Red Wings have done. Basically, very simple. Go check out the Twitter account at Jets MOTB. If you think you put down a little bet as to how the season's going to go for the Jets. Oh, I'm going to bet $1 for every Mark Scheifele goal. I'm going to bet $10 if the Winnipeg Jets win tonight, and all the money, if you do end up getting your predictions right, or you set a certain amount of goal, or a certain goal. Excuse me, geez, I'm flustered. If you set a certain amount for for every Winnipeg goal of the night, it'll all get donated to four fantastic charities. There's Toba Center for Children and Youth, Rainbow Resource Center, Project 11, and Manitoba Association of Women's Shelters. Like I said, please go check it out. I'll make sure to throw a link into the chat right away. But anyways, that's the housekeeping today. So again, Jets win 6-4 against the Panthers tonight. Man, what a game! Like just the most chaotic, crazy game I've seen. I mean, I guess it's only the second game of the season, but Jacob, we were chatting a little bit before and during the game. You told me that you did at least check out at least a little bit of the game the other night against the Flames. Have you noticed anything really like different about the Jets this year? Is there anything, like, any sort of identity that's kind of changed since last year? Obviously, we had some key departures. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the Jets this year going forward. I mean, obviously, we've only had 2 games so far, but yeah, let us know.
Well, so far, what I think the biggest things that have stuck out to me is the forward depth, and that's kind of a one to cherry pick. But when you're looking at the way that Rick Bowness and even Paul Maurice before like to run it, where you have that checking line of Adam Lowry at the spearheading that. Having a player like Alex Iafallo as your third line left winger is such a luxury, and I think that I'm not the craziest about Mason Appleton as a whole, but I think Appleton, Lowry, and Iafallo, that's probably one of the best third lines in the league. And it trickles down, right? You have Nemesnikov on your fourth line. You kind of got all those points of what you want in a four-line attack. And it's funny, I was on the Level Flight podcast with Connor Harabchuk, and we were saying how, like, I initially was saying history would tell us, and I hoped I was wrong, that they wouldn't play the fourth line much, but to Connor's credit, as he pointed out, like, their depth is too good to not do that. And you're seeing that. So seeing their fourth line actually be a useful line, seeing the penalty kill be, very, very instrumental in their attack, that's the biggest differences I've noticed so far.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that that's kind of the big talking point around the Jets this year. They kind of traded away a bit of the star power for a bit more depth.
Yeah.
That kind of leads me into a little bit of the next question. I mean, tonight the depth worked out. I mean, we had goals from Morgan Barron, we had goals from Mason Appleton on that hilarious no stick handoff from Josh Morrissey to Adam Lowry. Obviously tonight in a game like this, the depth worked out for the Jets. My question to you is more, do you believe that the route that they've taken with gathering more depth will pay off for them in the long run? Do you think that star power is maybe a little bit less necessary, or do you think that, throughout the course of a year, it might become a little bit more apparent that, if things don't go perfectly in regards to depth scoring, that maybe things might not go right?
Well, it's funny because if you look at the Dubois trade, let's also remember, it's not like Pierre-Luc Dubois was the X factor for Winnipeg Jets. Great player, love his game. I think he has potential to be one of the best power forwards in the league. But losing Dubois, I don't think it completely decimates the Jets, right? You still have up front, you have Scheifele, KC, you got Ehlers, Perfetti, you hope takes a step this year, so on and so forth, right? So it's not depleting the team in a massive way. And then you bring in Velarde, who could have a fantastic season, Iafallo, Kupari, and you're adding that to then a nucleus I just mentioned. Like, I think that helps, especially because as good as Dubois was, he didn't want to be here. On some nights he was great, but other nights he was downright invisible. And I think star power is one thing, but the NHL isn't like the NBA, right? There's not just 5 guys playing and you need a star that's like instrumental. There's 4 lines, 3 pairings, you'd say 2 goals. There's 1 goalie in a game, but goalies aren't playing every single night anymore. That's kind of not the way the game is going. So the point I'm trying to make is you need depth. And I think this really helps them with that. And, say what you want, but for different reasons, Dubois and Wheeler, I think it was best that they moved on. So bringing in players that, I think Rick Bowness touched on it, but having people that want to be Winnipeg Jets is so, so important because, you and I both know it. Winters get long here. It gets cold. It's not the best time, of the year in a lot of ways. So you need to have people that are loving playing hockey and okay with that. It's not for everyone. That's fine. But, and to be clear, Blake Wheeler was very much loved the city of Winnipeg. I think the reason he shouldn't be here is different, which is well documented. But I think that you need to have a team that's all in, and a team aspect's big for a Jets team. You still need star power, and they have it. But in terms of when you're looking at the bottom of their lineup, or I guess you could say lines 2 to 4, or whatever it is, I think that they're a better hockey team now than they were last year.
Yeah, I completely agree. And obviously you kind of touched on the different players that kind of have been added to this nucleus, this core that we already have here. But I know that you and I were having a chat again during the game, and you were mentioning a couple players who kind of stood out to you in today's game. And maybe they're not exactly the players who just got added to the core, but rather some players who maybe have had previous poor years. Did you want to speak on that at all?
I thought Neal Pionk had a great game, all things considered. I think that as much as the second line center is a big part of, like, a big question mark going into this year and a big X factor, you could say, in terms of will Perfetti be that 2C in an effective way, Neal Pionk playing at the level that he's shown to be capable of, that's another big part of it too. And what I saw from him tonight was the Neal Pionk from 2 years ago. And I think the thing with Pionk that's kind of misunderstood is what's working to his advantage is he's a really smart player, Pionk, right? And last year especially, there was always instances where whether it was just making mistakes or whatever it was, but you rarely found him out of position. And I think that that was a good predecessor to this year where he's taking away the body pretty well. His passes are much more crisp. He looks poised out there, and that's big for the Jets. And, when Neal Pionk's at his best, it's not even just that he can score, 30 points a year, be a power play weapon. He can handle tough matchups. He can log big minutes, and that's really, really important for the Jets back end. So that was my big takeaway from the game. I think, and you thought the same, no? You saw some of the things.
Yeah, I think that like I have to acknowledge my biases, and I'm sure if anyone here has listened to the show before, they know I'm a little harder on Pionk than maybe some of the other players, and I think that that's just coming from a point of being a little bit frustrated with his usage on the team sometimes.
And his contract.
Exactly.
Like it's, yeah.
And like looking at like even last game, like there was the one goal where he was on the PK, goes right off his foot and then goes straight to a player who's ready for a shot. Like immediately my first instinct there was to go, you shouldn't be covering that guy. You should be covering a different guy and blah, 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 this and that. And I don't think that's fair to him. And I think that also Pionk has this kind of aura when you watch him. He stands out in comparison to the rest of the players in the sense that he looks a little awkward the way he skates ever since kind of that injury that he had a couple seasons ago.
Yeah.
He looks different in regards to his skating style, as well as kind of how he plays. But I thought tonight he did actually look a lot better. And one of the reasons I was even saying to you, again, only 2 games, but I have absolutely loved Dylan Sandberg on this team so far. He looks so steady and like he just looks like he's matured into an NHL veteran at this point. I know it's only his second season, but he doesn't, I don't look at that guy and have to worry like, oh, do we have to put, like DeMello with him to do the babysitting kind of thing. Of the 2 of the guys on that pairing, like I would say I personally would lean towards Sandberg as being the more reliable of the 2.
Yeah, for sure.
And I really like that pairing together. I think that Sandberg can kind of help provide the stability that Pionk needs in order to play at the top of his game. But we'll see as the season goes on, as more bumps and bruises come by. But yeah, I mean, like I'm just happy. Like this was just a fun game for the Jets tonight. I'm just super excited to finally be here again and watching the guys play. I know you already kind of touched on Gabe Vilardi and some of the pieces that came back, but I think that top line, like we have to talk about that top line. I feel like they are kind of providing that almost like I don't want to give them too much credit and say the Globetrotters kind of style of offense, but it really feels like the Jets have kind of found a good top line that works together. I think that personally I have seen at least in Scheifele a concerted effort to play a bit more defensively. Again, only 2 games in, it can wear off in the future, but I've been really impressed with his play recently, as well as I think that Gabe Vilardi kind of just fits on that line. I'm not sure if you had any thoughts on either of those players or even Kyle Connor, or what you want to say.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it on the head. They have found a combination that really works. I know they liked having Wheeler there, the obvious chemistry with those guys, but the fact he was a right shot on a strong side on the wall. What I like about Vilardi, and I talked to him early in training camp, and he was kind of mentioning, and I thought for a second he was being humble, but about how the 2 skilled players, he just has to get the puck to them. Obviously, Gabe Vilardi can provide offense too, right? He's no schmuck, but I think that if you have a guy of his skill set, being that sort of retriever per se, and able to make passes through seams, able to find a Kyle Connor on a strong side, able to get Mark Scheifele in the slot, that makes a massive difference. And I think that when you have, especially too, just on the wall, having that big of a body, I think it's such a seamless fit for them. I don't think that Vilardi, maybe people disagree, I don't see him as a driver. I don't see him as a guy that's going to drive a line on his own. He's probably going to be a very good complementary player. And in this role, is probably best suited for him. And I'll agree with you with the Scheifele thing, man. Like I'm definitely a critic of Mark Scheifele at times, but he looks very dialed in. Like he looks very dialed in every facet of the game. This is game 2, keep in mind. And I think that, not just Scheifele, but the Jets as a whole have shown us at certain times that they'll dip off and kind of jump off a cliff in certain ways. So I'm gonna temper expectations, but there's no doubt Scheifele has looked really dialed in. KC looks dangerous. He looks like
Yeah.
his usual form. Like every time he's out there, he's gonna whip it out. Like just you're like, holy crap! Like this guy he's floating out there sometimes. So that line is really dialing in. I honestly think the real question though is about that. What do you think about the second line?
I was gonna go there right away. Before we do, I just have to comment on. I was tweeting about this. I loved the fact that off of just a dumb little non-call for interference kind of thing for Tkachuk, the fact that even Scheifele decides to kind of go back at him and give him shit. Like again, I don't know if this was a concerted effort by him or not, but the fact that he, goes up to Tkachuk and goes, "Hey, you want to go?" Like you can literally see him in his face saying, "You want to go?" in the home opener, in front of the home crowd, right after you sign a deal, and on top of that, you take off one of the Panthers' best players for 5 minutes as they're about to try to mount a comeback against the Jets. And hey, I mean, we saw they almost made the comeback. If they had 5 extra minutes of Matt Tkachuk on the ice, that could be a different game. And
totally.
So I had to give some credit to Scheifele there again. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, or whatever. But yeah, the second line is interesting. That is, I have a lot of faith in Cole Perfetti. I'm a big fan of his. I think he is kind of the big key piece of that line on whether or not it will work out. I think that it will take a little bit of time. He'll make some mistakes. Again, this is only like I think this is on the broadcast. This is only like his 75th NHL game.
71st, yeah.
71st. Exactly.
Which is crazy.
He's got a lot of time to figure it out, and he's already being given such an important role. And again, that second line, like while it is a second line, it can still be almost looked at like a
1B.
Or even I would almost say like a 2A. Like the way that that the Jets are gonna use both the third line and the fourth line, like
fair.
Perfetti isn't gonna have to take the craziest matchups because they're gonna be putting the defensive shutdown line with Lowry against the other team's best. They're gonna be putting the Scheifele line against whoever. So I have a lot of time for them to figure it out, and I thought tonight. Not only did Cole Perfetti have a better game, even just getting that beautiful assist on the DeMello goal, great vision on his part, and that's kind of what the Jets need him for. I mean, on that line, Nino Niederreiter's a shoot first guy. Nikolai Ehlers is a shoot first guy. So I think that he fits very well on that line. It's just about whether or not he can, step up to the, what is needed of a 2C.
Yeah, and just like to that point, you touch on it, but also like a big part of look that pass, the DeMello goal, right? That was Cole Perfetti at his peak, just amazing vision, able to decipher seams just in an instant, and it was a great play. Obviously, it was nice for DeMello to snipe it too, which no one expected. But I think that big part of that line is dependent on which version of Nick Ehlers are we going to get. Yeah, not to say he's inconsistent, but is he gonna? How many games is he gonna play this year? Right, like how and people don't really talk about this, but before the Jets acquired Nino Niederreiter, like Niederreiter was kind of known as a bit of a streaky player. Like he's a high volume shooter, but he has those lulls. So those two guys will be a big part of what you'll get out of Cole Perfetti. He's not going to become a lightning fast skater. He's not going to change who he is. What Cole Perfetti is a super smart, cerebral centerman that can come under the play, facilitate, make plays through the middle of the ice on his forehand and backhand, and set up a volume shooter in Niederreiter or a zone entry machine Ehlers. So how those two guys on the flanks do will really define how he progresses and how this season goes, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to even just speak on it further, like I remember like coming into the season before we saw any like line combinations or anything like that, I personally wanted Perfetti to be playing with Kyle Connor because in my mind, I was thinking, the pass guy with, the most cerebral goal scorer that the Jets have. Would make a lot of sense, but obviously the game is more than just, hey, this guy has the puck and he needs to pass it to this guy and shoot. And partnering him, I think with Nick Ehlers, for example, it kind of gives. I feel like the line mates that they've given Cole Perfetti perfectly make up for his weaknesses. He's not the biggest
Totally.
He's not the biggest player, and yet Nino Niederreiter's out there and he's willing to bang and crash and go into the dirty areas for the team. And he's also not the most fleet of foot guy. So having a guy like Ehlers on that line in order to facilitate the zone exits and zone entries, it just makes sense as long as everything can come together and work out. The worry that you might have is it just doesn't mesh. But in only 2 games, like the Flames game, I thought that all in all they weren't fantastic, and that kind of goes to your point of, it really depends on how Nick Ehlers is playing, because that guy missed all of preseason, and it looked like he was a little bit rusty. Whereas tonight, despite having ended the game against the Flames where he looked like he was injured potentially, he looked like a speed demon tonight. Like, he was all over the place. I absolutely loved the back check that he had on that one. It was after his slashing penalty. They got a goal, a chance to score, and then the puck came back and he came and just absolutely pickpocketed someone and went back up the ice, and they almost scored again. Like, things are just looking really good for the Jets, in my opinion. And as far as what I really liked about them tonight was that it felt like they just kept their foot on the gas. I mean, despite the slight breakdown near the end of the game, the Jets were firing on all cylinders all the way till the end of the game. And another thing that maybe you can touch on the defensive side of things, but I found tonight that, and especially tonight, but also last game, the defense just seemed to be like stepping up and playing the blue line so much more. And going back to when the Jets were the best that they were, when they had, a capable blue line, when Dustin Byfuglien, Toby Enstrom, all these guys were here. One of the things that was actually good under Maurice was that they played a very aggressive at the blue line.
They aimed for point shots. It was a priority. Exactly. You saw it every time.
Exactly. But even on the, like, in regards to keeping pressure on whenever the opposing team, it wasn't just a back out and let them get their zone exit. It really seems like Rick Bowness wants them to be playing active at the line, trying their best to keep the puck in, keeping the foot on the gas. And again, it worked out for most of the night, in my opinion. Again, bit of a breakdown near the end, but yeah, I don't know where the question is here, but
no, but I think in terms of the defense, like, from my biggest takeaway about it is you look at, okay, so there's Schmidt, who is grossly overpaid, and he is what he is. He's a bottom pairing guy. There's DeMello, who's a good defenseman. He just needs to kind of be with a Morrissey type. There's a lot of, like, pieces, and I think last year it was almost like a puzzle that was, like, distorted, right? Not everything was meshing together, I think. Mm-hmm. But this year, and it's too bad for Ville, the injury, right? He would have been a perfect kind of complement to some of these guys. It really is too bad. But I guess what I saw, at least the first 2 games, is way more in sync. The first passes were more crisp, but also because the forwards are much better, I think that there's a lot more support for them down low, a lot more support in those, whether it's outlet passes and whatnot. You've got guys on the flanks that are much more susceptible to take passes. Like, Perfetti as a winger is kind of just a suicide pass. The kid's gonna get crunched, like, at this point. Let's be honest. So the roster configuration up front definitely helps that too, I would say. I think that, I mean, like, guys like Dylan and Schmidt, to be honest, all things considered, played pretty well today. I think, it's 1 game, it's 2 games, right? So it's really early, but you're right. I think you nailed it on the head. The D are actually playing active. It was a big thing they wanted to do last year, but as the year went on, it just seemed like it wasn't even workable aside from Morrissey, right? So I think what you've seen so far is an active and effective decor.
Yeah, and excuse me. Like, I completely agree where in regards to, like, how things just felt off last year, especially later on in the season. The Jets were able to filter a lot of their offense still through the D-men later on in the season, but I think the big issue was that while they were getting shots from the D-men, nothing was coming from it. There was no chaos in front. There was no tips.
Totally.
There was no rebounds. The way the Jets were scoring like crazy last year at the start of the season was that they were able to continually get those shots on, get tips in front, get the second, third, fourth shots until it's in the back of the net. And I absolutely love the fact that you pointed out the that like the forwards have to do with that, whether it's, you know, on the breakout with, again, the Cole Perfetti not being able to really move his feet there, but and Blake Wheeler being a player
Totally, that's another
was
good
just
point.
completely able to be pressured off the puck. The two games that the Jets have had, the way I would describe their offense is chaotic, which is good, which is great, especially for
Totally.
a team that creates from the blue line so much. Yeah, it's things are looking really good for the Jets right now. I mean, everyone kind of pegged them to be kind of middle of the Central. I'm curious where you, coming into the season, I guess now that you have 2 games of foresight, where do you kind of peg the Jets in regards to the playoff race, the division, and conference and whatever, you know? How
I
are
still
you
think
feeling?
I still think they're a wild card team. Like, that's kind of the way I see it. And when I say that, I mean kind of like wild card, like fringe, or like either they'll make a wild card spot or they'll miss the playoffs.
Mhm.
That's what I said before. And listen, I'm encouraged by what I've seen, but I'm still going to kind of stick to that. I think people are underestimating a lot of teams in the Central. Namely, I don't know if you've noticed this. I feel like every Jets fan just criminally underrates Minnesota. No matter what happens, it's always like you look at the standings and everyone's like, "Oh, but it's Minnesota." It's like every time the Jets play Minnesota, recently, I think Minnesota's been the better team. So
Yeah.
that's my opinion about it. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, am I out
I
to lunch?
No, I think that also a lot of the whenever the Jets play Minnesota, I think that also has to do with, I feel like there's always been kind of like the Minnesota flu. I feel like people have kind of deemed it, just having the Jets have
Fair.
so many Minnesotans that when they go to Minnesota, they, you know, they get the family time, they get maybe a big
Right.
dinner, they get a little too comfortable. But
Minnesota flu.
but yeah, no, I feel like the teams that the Jets fans, at least right now, that are underrating. I feel like the Predators, while
I agree.
regardless of, you know, I have my questions for that team. I have a lot of questions about how they're going to score. At the end of the day, they have UC Saros, so I think that naturally they're going to be better than everyone else expects. A lot of people I've talked to, myself included, are very much down on the Blues, and I think that's more of a like vibes thing rather than a
Yeah.
like I feel like that's everyone going, oh, I could see Arizona and Chicago doing better than I expect.
That's
Just
such
not,
a vibes thing.
yeah,
Because it's
just
like
because
they're
you're like,
exciting.
yeah,
Yeah.
just because you're like, oh yeah, Connor Bedard, Logan Cooley, those guys will
Totally.
certainly skew the standings.
Well, to
um,
me, like, I'll be honest with you, when I was watching today's game, I was kind of thinking about this. And it's like, if you look, there's 2 things. One, the Jets are so lucky that they don't have to play against a Barkov all the time, too.
yeah,
Like, oh my gosh, that guy's a mammoth. Obviously, Nate Max in the division, and there's very good centers in this league. But I think in terms of the depth, like the Jets have some. It's been said, like, even before with Dubois, right? The Jets are the best 3 centers in the league. Remember, they were saying that all the time, like,
yeah,
which is just not true. But the Jets center depth is actually a huge asset for them, and that's going to be really, really key, I think, in this interdivisional play. Because if you look at their center depth, like in Nashville, right? They have a Ryan O'Reilly who's good, but he's probably for sure a 2C now. Tommy Novak, good player. I wouldn't say he's a 1C either. And the other bubble teams have that problem too. It's kind of a long-winded out there take to say. But I think that if you look at the way the Jets stack up against the other division, I mean, I don't mean to railroad this, but their power play has to be elite, in my opinion. If
yeah.
you think they're going to be better than a wild card team, they need to get this power play at an elite level. I think you saw some good glimpses of it, but I just want to, like, the penalty kill is great, which is awesome, but I think the power play needs to be exceptional, like top 7 or top 10.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. Like that was the whole thing last year, was the power plays just felt absolutely anemic, like completely Like the every single power play you could write it up. The script was
100%.
written. It
So
was
predictable.
the first minute is going to be them failing to enter the zone. Eventually they get off the ice. The second power play comes on. Maybe they get into the zone. Maybe they get possession. But at that point, it's 10 seconds left in the power play, and
And it's like Casey gets it, does a little dance with it, and then he dishes it back to Morrissey. And like you could just tell that morning at the Delta Hotel, they had a PK meeting. Like, all right, here's exactly what the Jets are to do.
exactly.
We're gonna do this, and it was just so predictable. So yeah, I think they really got to get that going. I don't know. Do you like Follow on PP1? What are your thoughts on that?
I am a firm believer in.
You're a big Ehlers guy.
Well, I am a big
Fair.
Ehlers guy, but regardless of if it was Ehlers, if it was Scheifele, if it was Connor, if it was Morrissey, if it was any of these other, or if it was Velarde, any of those guys, if they are left off the top power play, I'd be making the exact same arguments for them. I fully believe you should be putting your best players out there the entire as long as possible on the power play. You should not be separating it into two, because here's the thing. Especially regarding like who is the first power play that goes onto the ice. The reason I campaigned so hard for Nikolai Ehlers is what was the issue with the first power play? It was the fact that they absolutely cannot get into the zone whatsoever.
Yeah.
And Nikolai Ehlers, like, that's what he does. He literally enters the zone. He is a zone entry god. So
It's true.
It just made no sense why he wasn't on the top power play last year. As far as this year goes, I mean, the top power play has looked better, but again, already today I saw those glimpses of even before the Scheifele goal. Luckily, they were able to get into the zone eventually, and Scheifele scored, but they were having trouble getting into the zone until that happened. So I think Iafallo is kind of there because he's just being given the net front, spot, the kind of, but he's also playing like the middle, which doesn't really make sense because I
mean, here's the thing though. The first Scheifele goal made me think about this. Scheifele needs to make that sweet spot like his trademark place, in my opinion. Like that's because we saw it before, but then he kind of got lost. Like in the middle of the ice, he has such a weapon, but I feel like we didn't see it enough at certain points.
Yeah,
like that's where he needs to make it his kitchen, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's where he saw the most success. Like going back to 2018, when Patrick Laine was the guy on the far wall. Like the whole point was that Scheifele was able to find and kind of hide in the weeds right in the middle. As they're watching the passes going left and right. There's a guy sitting in the middle who is right in the slot, like in the prime spot to shoot, and that is exactly where Scheifele has scored the most amount of his power play goals. He's just really good at sneaking away from guys and getting his stick down. And it just, I don't know, like it feels so obvious to me that that's where he should go.
I agree.
It allows a lot less, because like right now it just feels like what I really get scared of when I start watching the power play is when I see them just doing the lackadaisical passes around the outside. And I feel like with having Scheifele on that the left wall, having Connor on the right wall, it's just going to keep going, because neither of those guys are the crazy, I'm going to Blake Wheeler pass this across three people's, and through three people's legs and somehow get it across. Unless that perfect seam opens up, which it rarely does nowadays.
No.
Like they're just gonna be passing around until one of them takes a crummy shot, and it just doesn't feel like there's enough movement. So, again, Ehlers has had a lot of success on that left wall. Velarde previously with the Kings had a lot of success in front of the net, which is where he's playing now, which is great. Scheifele has had a lot of success in the middle, and Kyle Connor's in his spot and Josh Morrissey's in his spot. Like it just makes a lot of sense to me, but. I don't know. Maybe there's a reason that they don't want to do that, because maybe what I would imagine Rick Bowness wants to do is try to capitalize on the pressure that's increasing, right?
Right.
And get the opposing power play tired, and then have a second wave of guys come back on who are fresh and ready to go. If the first power play isn't ready to or able to score in the first half, but if that pressure doesn't start, then what happens, right? You get the power play of last year, right? So
for sure.
At
Well,
least
it's almost like
things are looking better at least this year. But
I would agree. I think that it has to be continuing at that level, like for them to be, and they really like they can't let the power play be an issue. Where, and what I mean by that is if they start sliding, they got to change it up. They
yeah,
have to change. They have to be more innovative and more proactive, frankly, because there would be stretches where you're going 10, 15 games of the same personnel on the first unit. You're not scoring an effective clip, and you're losing games because of it. So that's kind of more so what I meant by the power play as a whole.
yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. But again, things are looking good. I have questions about Iafalo's usage there, but again, the first game, the power play looked fantastic. This
Mm-hmm.
game, not too bad. So I guess we'll see how it goes. But I think we're gonna hop over to a couple questions from the chat, so I don't keep you here
Sweet.
too long. Um, from Stressful Gengar, what team is your far too early improved team, and what team is your far too early playoff dropout? So, who do you think has from just the little bits that you've seen this year and with all the moves in the offseason, is there a team specifically that you can think of that looks like they have significantly improved this year? And is there any team that you're already pegging as a playoff dropout from last year?
Okay, so this is not recency bias, and I'm almost positive I wrote this for our Yahoo Sports. We did an article, our whole staff of who we thought we'd miss, surprise like playoff miss. I picked Florida, and I think that listen, recency bias. You can say whatever you want, but losing Ekblad and Montour for a huge chunk here is going to be really tough.
Yeah.
There's that to start. Second of all, Spencer Knight, who's now in the minors, he was away from the team last year due to some mental health issues. We don't know when he's going to be back. I think it's going to be conditioning sent, I'm pretty sure, because of his contract or whatever. But Sergei Bobrovsky, like, man, good playoff run, whatever, but still a question mark for me over an 82-game season. I think their bottom six is very Paul Maurice like in some facets. And I mean, I was messaging you in the game, like Oliver Ekman Larson is on their first power play unit. Like, what is it? 2011? Like, come on. He got a nice tape job. He kind of like corrals it a bit, but like, what are we doing here? So yeah, I'm very weary of the Cats. Like, I'm really not into. What was the second part of the question? Was it a surprise team to make it?
Early, far too early. Like, who improved the most?
Yeah. Okay. Like, does it have to be a team that like made a lot of additions?
Just and take it any way you want. Like, who's a team that you can if you're just making a prediction to say this team is going to be significantly improved from last year, who would you say is your top spot for that?
Honestly, Ottawa. I think the Ottawa Senators are going to really come into their own this year. And I think that, okay, so you look at the Pinto situation is hilarious. The fact that they cannot sign this player right now, and he was like in Ottawa. Do you see this? He was in Ottawa, but he flew back home because like some reporter spotted him tweeting or skating at the practice facility, and he left. And Bruce Garroch said I was too much of a distraction from him being there. So it's like they genuinely have to exile the guy. Ottawa is such an interesting team because when you look at the way they've built from the ground up, right? They have, intentional or not, of course you want to go best player available, but here's the reality. They've built this core around really competitive players that suck to play against. Ridley Gregg, if you don't know his name now, you will know it this year. That guy's a menace. That guy sucks to play against, and he's really good. Like, I'm talking really good. And that year, when they drafted him, the Sens had 3 first-round picks. It was a near certainty they were going to trade the third one. But when Greg slipped to them, they were like, no, we're drafting him. They love him that much. Okay, there's him. And then Brady Tkachuk, I think he's an excellent leader. And he's really kind of the face of that identity I'm talking about. And then you have Sanderson, Shabbat, Chychrun on your back end. All 3 guys for different reasons that I think are going to take a massive step this year. And I think a big part of it is a respective deployment. So I'm big on the Senators this year. And yeah, they suck to play against. I'm telling you, man. People are going to see what the Sens are all about this year.
Yeah, I don't know if I fully share your thoughts on the Senators. I think that some things aren't going to go right for them in the future, but
that's fair.
But that's fair. I have questions about their goaltending, but just to answer the question as well myself, my playoff dropout this year. If you listen to Can't Teach Sides with my co-host Liz And I predicted that this year is the year that the Tampa Bay Lightning fall out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
That is my hot take. I'm ready to have it thrown in my face at the end of the season when they are naturally back in the cup final. But
They win the cup.
I mean, hey, they could. They genuinely could. But I don't know. I feel like this just feels like the year where they're going to take a step back in regards to. I think the Vasilevsky injury will be a big effect on it, at least to start the season.
For
I know
sure.
it's only a couple months, but it's the Lightning. Who knows? Maybe a couple months is more than a couple months because it works out better for them in money ways. Who knows? Who knows? But they also feel like a team I could just see maybe getting. They've always kind of had a bit of injury trouble, so I could, and also with the rise of the rest of the teams of the Atlantic, someone's got to take a step back at some point, right? So they're my pick personally, and I also as far as improvement, I don't know. I don't really have a who improved the most. I would say the Jets. No, I'm kidding. I think naturally it's kind of the low hanging fruit answer, but like the Blackhawks. I mean, they got Connor Bedard, and not only did they do that, Taylor Hall's going to be out for a while, but
they had him at one point.
They did have him. I mean, Corey Perry's there, Nick Foligno, again, some guys who are a little past their prime, but that still feels like a young team that could maybe get a lot out of. Even guys like Lucas Reichel is a promising young guy as well too. I think that they'll be totally. I think they'll be decent. I think they'll be better than most people expect them to be, but they still have Peter Mrazek in net, so maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. One other question here. Let's see. Who are your top 3 dark horses this year?
Players or
teams? Let's do teams. I would imagine teams, but
okay. So dark horse, as in like to win the cup or make the playoffs, or what do you want?
Let's do. Could win the cup, but you wouldn't be traditionally in the conversation of that, I guess, if that makes sense.
It's a great question. No, totally. The Devils don't count, hey?
I don't think they do. I feel like that's the trendy pick.
It's the cool thing to do. I think if I'm looking for a couple dark horses, I could bite my tongue here, but I'm gonna say Minnesota. I really like Minnesota. The reason I like Minnesota is this. People talk about the Zuccarello and Foligno contracts, whatever. Like, to me, it's like they're big parts of the team. You overpay them. They're big parts of them. Okay.
Contracts are just contracts. It's about what's playing on the ice at the end of the day, right?
The Wild are just, not only have they always they've been like the definition of like, they've been the mushroom middle for a long time, but just in my opinion, sort of the injection of the young talent, Brock Faber, I think Marco Rossi will be a pretty decent piece for them this year. They needed a little bit of youth in their lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at their top guys, like Joel Eriksson, great two-way center. I really love his game. Ryan Hartman has come out of the top rope to be like a great center. It's crazy. Like he's really solidified himself as a top 6 piece. I think he was in the AHL at one point. Like it's like after he was good in the Blackhawks, I'm pretty sure. Unless it's Vinny Hinostroza. I always get them confused. But I do think that the Wild have like a really solid team. And you look at it, like whether it's the Jets or whether it's other teams we talk about, everyone wants to talk about blowing it up. And maybe sometimes it's warranted, maybe it's not. But sometimes you just need a good group to get over the hump. I was listening to the CJ show on your guys' network, and CJ made a great point. Sorry, Chris Johnson show. But CJ made a great point about how, Derek Stepan, who just retired, scored like a triple OT winner with the Rangers to beat the Capitals. And that Capitals team this was like 5-6 years ago. That Caps team took so many times to even get over the hump year after year after year. And some people look at it like, okay, this team needs to blow it up. It's not working. But to me, in my opinion, it's like, okay, no, like if you look at it, they just need a couple bounces to go their way. Philip Gustafson is legit. Like jump on the Gus bus, man. He's legit.
Terrible trade for Ottawa, but oh my God. But
horrible trade. But I don't know how you could foresee this. And then like Flower, that's your backup or 1B, whatever you want to call it. Like Minnesota's doing it right. They have a guy in Gustafson that can win you games, like in clutch moments. So can Flower. Don't get me wrong. They're going to have those guys pretty well rested throughout the year. They're getting younger in the areas they need to, and their nucleus is still strong. That's my dark horse. I don't have another 2. I'm gonna go. Actually, I'll go Vancouver.
I feel a lot stronger on Vancouver than I feel like a lot of other people do.
Yeah,
As long as Demko can stay healthy and play well, like that provides them a lot of things that they need
I
because
agree.
their defense isn't great, but if you have a good goaltender that can make up for that, and they clearly have the scoring powers. They scored like 8 goals against the Oilers the other night, right?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Um, and maybe it could be also my bias. I am previously a Canucks fan before the Jets came back, but I would say
Bias.
them, and then I think I would say my other picks, my honorable mentions. Obviously, the Buffalo Sabres. I feel like that's a little bit of a trendy pick in regards
Yeah.
to being better than people expect this year. As long as they can figure out their goaltending situation, be very interesting for them. Other than that, I mean, like, we can't count out the Pittsburgh Penguins at the end of the day. Like, Jari's going to be healthy this year,
Yeah.
hopefully. If they can figure out how to properly, play both Carlson and Letang, if they can avoid injuries, you still got Crosby. Gensel is healthy right now. Malkin's healthy. If they can keep their health, that could be a potentially scary team. And I'll close out the dark horse section by saying this: the Winnipeg Jets. No, I don't think this is the year for the Jets, but I look at this team and I go, they have a lot of really good pieces. It looks like things are looking better on the defensive end of things. They seem to have a bit of a defensive mind, a bit like more focus on it this year, or at least with Rick Bowness, they seem to have a bit more of a focus on defense than they had previously, and they do have some decent scores. I look at this team and they still have their additions that they made at the trade deadline last year in Vlad Nemestikov and Niederreiter. If they can get you have a potential guy who can step in Ville Heinola, who might potentially make an impact on the D side of things. And then, as you approach the trade deadline, if this is a team that's buying, if they go out and if they swing big and get another scorer,
Oh, I know. I
like
agree.
they have the depth, they have the goalie, they have good enough defense. It's
Yeah.
possible.
I don't think it's that outlandish, man. I really don't.
I never
I
thought I
seriously
would be
don't.
sitting here saying this, and I understand that I am biased, but it's like they have a lot of I can understand why this team goaded themselves into keeping their players and not blowing it up. I can understand why they go, we have a window ahead of us as long as we re-sign these guys. So again,
Well, look, as long as you have Connor Hellebuck or like a superstar that we're talking about, you have a chance. So I think that they're honestly a very plausible dark horse. I really believe it.
yeah, it is. It's definitely possible, and it's going to be an exciting year. But I think I've kept you here long enough. I really do appreciate your time here, Jacob. I'm sure we'll
No
have you
worries, man.
back on at some point as well in the future. Seems like
Sure
the
thing.
chat seems to like you. So before we do head out here, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah. Follow me on Twitter at JL Stoller. I think I'm giving like a shout out at the end of a mixtape here. Yeah. You catch me outside. Yeah. So follow me on Twitter, JL Stoller. If you like to read Yahoo Sports stuff on the app when you're setting your fantasy lineup, go to the NHL stuff. You'll find my columns and yeah, the hockey news. You can find my face for radio all over our video platforms and stuff. And in the magazine, you should subscribe. And yeah,
Awesome.
Yep.
Really
Thanks for
appreciate
having me,
it. Obviously follow at SDPN Sports on Twitter, follow at NHL Chunky. Of course, please give some love to Jacob. He was a fantastic guest on our inaugural Jets only show here on Game Over Winnipeg. But for myself, for Liz, for Jacob, thank you all for watching. We will see you next game when Pierre-Luc Dubois and the Kings roll into town. It should be a fun one. Can't wait to get to that one. Once again, thank you, Jacob. Anyways,